The silence that followed the collapse was louder than the explosion itself. For decades, the world has held its breath every time a tanker moved through the narrow, winding waters of the Strait of Hormuz. It is the jugular vein of the global economy. 20% of the oil consumed by the entire planet passes through this choke point. If it closes, prices skyrocket. Supply chains shatter. Economies bleed out. We have been told for years that Iran holds the key to this disaster. We have been told they have built an impenetrable fortress of missile tunnels carved deep into the mountains overlooking the strait. These tunnels were supposed to be their ultimate insurance policy. They were meant to survive any airstrike, any bunker buster, any attempt to neutralize their threat. But something changed. The ground did not just shake, it gave way. The secret infrastructure that was designed to be eternal has failed. And the implications of this structural collapse are far more terrifying than a simple military setback. This is not just about rocks and concrete. This is about the sudden, violent exposure of a strategy that relied on secrecy and invincibility. When the shield breaks, the sword becomes reckless. And when a nation that feels cornered loses its hidden protection, the rules of engagement change instantly. You need to understand what just happened because the ripple effects are already moving toward your wallet, your job, and your safety. Most people are looking at the headlines and seeing a geological event. They are missing the strategic earthquake that is happening beneath the surface. This is where people go wrong. They think stability is the default state of the world. It is not. Stability is a fragile illusion maintained by balance. That balance has just been shattered. The Strait of Hormuz is barely 20 miles wide at its narrowest point. It is a maritime bottleneck where the margin for error is zero. For years, military analysts have studied satellite imagery of the Iranian coastline, trying to pinpoint the exact locations of these underground facilities. They knew they existed. They knew they were heavily fortified, but they did not know how deep they went or how interconnected they were. The recent collapse suggests that the engineering required to maintain such vast underground networks in unstable geological terrain was flawed from the start. Or perhaps the stress of constant readiness and the weight of the arsenal stored within finally exceeded the limits of the rock itself. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. A significant portion of Iran's asymmetric warfare capability has been compromised. But here's the dangerous part. You might think this makes the world safer. You might think that with fewer missiles hidden in mountains, the threat of conflict decreases. That is a fatal misunderstanding. History shows us that when a military power loses its defensive depth, it does not become peaceful. It becomes unpredictable. It becomes desperate. The tunnels were not just storage sites. They were a psychological anchor. They allowed Iranian leadership to feel secure enough to play a long game. Now that security is gone. The feeling of exposure creates a pressure cooker environment. And pressure cookers do not cool down when the lid is cracked. They explode. If you are watching this, you are likely aware that the world feels more volatile than it has in decades. But volatility is not random. It follows patterns. And the pattern we are seeing now is one of escalating risk due to perceived vulnerability. When a state actor feels their core defenses are exposed, they often compensate by increasing their aggressive posture on the surface. They need to show strength to mask weakness. This is a classic behavioral trigger in international relations, but it plays out in real time with real consequences for ordinary people. Think about what happens to the price of gasoline when a single ship is delayed. Now imagine the panic if the entire strait is threatened not by a calculated strategy, but by a reactive, cornered adversary. The markets do not care about the geology of the Zagros Mountains. They care about the flow of oil. And right now, that flow is under a new kind of threat. It is no longer a threat of planned escalation. It is a threat of accidental ignition. One misjudged move, one panicked response to a perceived slight could trigger a chain reaction that no one intended, but everyone feared. This is what nobody tells you. The most dangerous moments in history are not when enemies are strong and confident. They are when enemies are scared and exposed. Before we go deeper into the specific mechanics of this collapse and what it means for global security, take a moment to consider how much of your daily life depends on the stability of these distant waterways. From the fuel in your car to the plastic in your phone, the supply chain is a delicate web. If you find value in understanding these hidden connections before they break, consider subscribing to this channel. We dedicate our resources to uncovering the truths that mainstream narratives often overlook, helping you stay prepared for the shifts that matter most to your family and your future. Your awareness is your best defense in an uncertain world. The engineering behind these missile tunnels was always a marvel of deception. They were not just holes in the ground. They were complex ecosystems of ventilation, rail systems, hardened doors, and command centers. They were designed to withstand direct hits from the most powerful conventional weapons in the American arsenal. The idea was that even if the surface was obliterated, the missiles inside would remain intact, ready to fire at any ship passing through the strait. This capability created a deterrent. It forced other nations to think twice before engaging. But deterrence only works if the threat is credible and survivable. The collapse raises a horrifying question. If the tunnels could not hold up against the weight of the Earth, could they have survived a war? The answer is likely no. This reveals that the entire strategic doctrine was built on a foundation of sand. It was a bluff backed by fragile rock. And now that the bluff has been called by nature itself, the geopolitical dynamics are shifting rapidly. Other regional powers are watching. They are recalculating. They see a window of opportunity, and windows of opportunity in this part of the world are often opened with violence. Let's look at the immediate economic impact. Oil traders are already reacting to the news, but not in the way you might expect. Initially, there was a spike in fear, but then a strange calm settled over the markets. Why? Because sophisticated investors understand that a collapsed tunnel system reduces Iran's ability to sustain a prolonged conflict. If their ammunition is buried under rubble, they cannot fire it. This creates a short-term sense of relief, but this is a trap. It lulls the world into a false sense of security. While the long-range missile threat may be diminished, the short-range threats have increased. Iran relies on a network of proxy groups, fast attack boats, and naval mines. These assets do not live in tunnels. They are mobile, they are dispersed, and they are now likely operating under orders to prove that Iran is still dangerous. The collapse of the static defenses means a shift toward dynamic, unpredictable attacks. This is harder to defend against. You can bomb a tunnel. You cannot easily bomb 1,000 small boats scattered across the horizon. This shift from static to dynamic warfare is the key takeaway here. It means the threat is no longer a single big event. It is 1,000 small cuts, and death by 1,000 cuts is just as fatal to the global economy. This is where it gets serious. The human element cannot be ignored. Inside those tunnels were soldiers, engineers, and commanders. The collapse likely resulted in significant casualties. This is not just a loss of hardware. It is a loss of life that will demand a response. In the culture of the region, honor and revenge are powerful motivators. The families of those lost will look for someone to blame. The leadership will look for a way to restore dignity. This emotional fuel adds a layer of volatility that cold strategic analysis often misses. When you combine grief with geopolitical pressure, you get actions that defy logic. A commander who has lost his unit and his shelter may act with a recklessness that a secure commander would avoid. This is the wild card. We can model the movement of ships. We can predict the price of oil, but we cannot predict the actions of a man who has nothing left to lose. And that uncertainty is what keeps intelligence agencies awake at night. It is what should keep you alert. Most people do not realize how interconnected these military failures are with domestic politics. The Iranian government uses its military strength as a primary source of legitimacy. It tells its people that they are protected, that they are strong, that they can resist the superpowers. The collapse of these secret projects undermines that narrative. It exposes incompetence. It exposes waste. It shows that the billions spent on these fortifications may have been wasted on poor engineering or corruption. When a regime's image of strength is cracked, it often lashes out externally to distract from internal weakness. This is a historical pattern seen in many nations during times of crisis. Look for signs of increased rhetoric. Look for heightened tensions with neighbors. These are not random events. They are symptoms of a system trying to stabilize itself by creating an external enemy. Understanding this helps you see through the noise. It helps you understand why tensions might rise even when there is no logical strategic reason for them. The logic is not strategic. It is political. It is survival. As we analyze these shifting tides, remember that knowledge is the only asset that cannot be inflated away. If you are finding this breakdown helpful in navigating the complex reality of global events, please like this video. It helps us reach more people who are seeking clarity amidst the chaos. Your support allows us to continue digging deeper, bringing you the insights that empower you to make better decisions for yourself and your loved ones. Stay with us, because the next section reveals the specific warning signs that indicate whether this situation is escalating toward conflict or de-escalating toward diplomacy. The warning signs are subtle, but they are there. First, watch the insurance rates for commercial shipping. Lloyd's of London and other major insurers adjust their premiums based on risk assessments. If you see a sudden spike in war risk premiums for vessels entering the Persian Gulf, it means the experts are seeing something the public is not. They are getting intelligence reports of increased activity. They are seeing movements of naval mines. They are hearing chatter about potential blockades. Insurance companies do not gamble. They price risk with brutal accuracy. If the price goes up, the danger is real. Second, monitor the diplomatic language. When diplomats stop talking about cooperation and start talking about red lines, the temperature is rising. Vague warnings are often precursors to action. Third, look at the movement of civilian traffic. If commercial airlines begin rerouting flights away from the region, it is a major indicator. Airlines have some of the best risk management teams in the world. They do not change routes for no reason. If they avoid the airspace, it is because they believe the threat of stray missiles or accidental engagements has become too high. These are the practical indicators you can track from home. You do not need a security clearance to see the storm clouds gathering. You just need to know where to look. But that is not even the worst part. The collapse of the tunnels may have exposed more than just missile silos. There are persistent rumors that these facilities also housed research and development units for advanced drone technology and cyber warfare capabilities. If these sensitive areas were compromised, it could lead to a leakage of technology. Imagine advanced drone designs falling into the hands of non-state actors or rival nations. The proliferation of this technology would destabilize the entire region. It would lower the barrier to entry for conducting aerial attacks. Suddenly, groups that previously could not afford air forces could launch devastating strikes. This is the nightmare scenario for global security. It is not just about Iran. It is about what happens to the tools of war when the vaults are broken open. The genie does not go back in the bottle. Once the technology is out, it spreads. And once it spreads, it is used. We are already seeing the use of cheap, effective drones in conflicts around the world. A breach in Iran's secure facilities could accelerate this trend dramatically. It could make remote, precise violence accessible to anyone with a motive and a modest budget. This changes the nature of terrorism. It changes the nature of insurgency. It brings the battlefield to your doorstep in ways we have not yet fully imagined. Consider the environmental risk as well. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a conduit for oil. It is a fragile marine ecosystem. Any conflict in this area risks catastrophic oil spills. If a tanker is hit or if offshore drilling platforms are targeted, the environmental damage would be immense. It would affect fisheries, water supplies, and coastal communities for generations. This is a consequence that rarely makes the headlines, but it is a very real possibility. The collapse of the tunnels increases the likelihood of chaotic, uncoordinated attacks. In chaos, mistakes happen. A missile aimed at a warship might miss and hit a supertanker. A mine might drift and strike a civilian vessel. The margin for error is gone. And when the error involves millions of barrels of crude oil, the cost is measured not just in dollars, but in ecological devastation. This is another layer of risk that most people ignore until it is too late. They assume someone else is managing the safety, but in a high-tension environment, safety is the first casualty. What happens next is worse if we remain passive. The international community is faced with a dilemma. Do they intervene to help stabilize the situation? Or do they step back and let the region burn itself out? Intervention risks drawing major powers into a direct conflict. Stepping back risks a humanitarian and economic disaster. There is no good option. This is the trap of modern geopolitics. Every choice has a heavy price. And the price is often paid by ordinary citizens who had no say in the decisions that led them there. This is why you must stay informed. You must understand the stakes. You must prepare for the economic shocks that are inevitable, whether it is higher energy costs, supply chain disruptions, or market volatility. The effects will reach you. Ignoring them does not make them go away. It only leaves you vulnerable. Preparation is not about panic. It is about resilience. It is about having the knowledge to adapt when the world changes. Here is what most people miss. The collapse of the tunnels is not an isolated event. It is part of a larger pattern of infrastructure failure in aging military complexes around the world. Many of these facilities were built decades ago during the Cold War era. They were not designed for the modern age. They were not maintained with the rigor required for today's high-tech arsenals. Corruption, neglect, and poor oversight have weakened structures globally. Iran is just the first domino to fall visibly. There are other secrets buried in other mountains. There are other silos cracking under pressure. This event should serve as a wake-up call for global security audits. It should force a reevaluation of how we store and manage dangerous materials. But until that happens, we are living in a world where the safeguards are weaker than we think. The illusion of control is just that, an illusion. And when it fades, the reality is harsh. The part almost nobody is prepared for is the psychological impact on the global population. We have grown accustomed to a certain level of order. We expect governments to protect us. We expect systems to work. When a major strategic facility collapses, it shakes our faith in that order. It reminds us that we are vulnerable. This anxiety can lead to poor decision-making. It can lead to hoarding, to panic buying, to social unrest. We saw glimpses of this during the early days of the pandemic. We saw it during the financial crises. Fear is a contagious disease. And in the age of social media, it spreads faster than any virus. This is why accurate, calm, and clear information is so vital. It acts as an antidote to panic. It helps you maintain perspective. It helps you see the situation for what it is, not for what your fears tell you it is. You have the power to choose how you react. You can choose to be overwhelmed, or you can choose to be informed. Choose to be informed. As we approach the end of this analysis, let's bring everything together. The collapse of Iran's secret missile tunnels is a pivotal moment. It exposes the fragility of military deterrents. It shifts the threat from static to dynamic. It increases the risk of accidental escalation. It threatens the global economy and the environment. And it reveals the deeper weaknesses in the infrastructure of power. This is not just a story about Iran. It is a story about the precariousness of our modern world. It is a reminder that peace is not a guarantee. It is a constant effort. And when the structures that support that peace fail, we must be ready to adapt. You are now more aware than you were 10 minutes ago. You understand the stakes. You know what to watch for. You know the risks. This knowledge is your shield. Use it wisely. If this video has opened your eyes to the hidden realities shaping our world, please share it with someone who needs to hear this. Share it with a friend who worries about the economy. Share it with a family member who wants to understand the news beyond the headlines. Sharing this information is an act of protection. It helps build a community of informed individuals who can navigate these turbulent times together. Do not keep this knowledge to yourself. Spread the awareness. Help others see the truth. In the end, the collapse of the tunnels is a physical event, but its meaning is metaphysical. It teaches us that nothing is permanent. Not power, not security, not stability. Everything is subject to decay, to error, to the relentless pull of gravity. The mountains themselves betrayed the secret they were meant to keep. And in that betrayal, we find a lesson. We must not rely on invisible walls to keep us safe. We must rely on our own vigilance, our own understanding, and our own resilience. The world is changing. The old maps no longer apply. The old rules are being rewritten in real time. You have the opportunity to read the new script before it is finalized. Do not waste it. Stay alert. Stay curious. Stay prepared. The next chapter is being written right now, and you are part of the story. Make sure you know your role. Make sure you are ready for what comes next. Because the silence after the collapse is over. The noise is beginning. And you need to be ready to hear it clearly.